I never thought I'd be the type of woman writing something like this, but here I am. My husband and I have been together for almost 9 years, married for 5. To most people, we looked like that stable couple who had it all figured out. A cozy house, steady jobs, and a rhythm to our life that felt safe, predictable. But if I'm being honest, I'd started to notice small cracks long before everything fell apart. He became distracted. His phone was always face down on the table. He'd step out of the room to take calls, and his work hours got mysteriously longer even though his job hadn't changed. When I asked about it, he brushed me off, saying I was overthinking things. I wanted to believe him. God, I needed to believe him. I told myself I was imagining it, that after years together maybe I was just being paranoid or insecure. But deep down something felt wrong. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. He was in the shower and his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally I would never snoop. I always believed trust was sacred, but something inside me snapped. My hands were shaking as I picked it up. The screen lit up with a message preview. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up. I opened the chat. There it was, weeks, maybe months, of flirty, intimate messages between him and some woman I had never heard of. Pictures, inside jokes, plans to meet. The kind of tenderness and attention I thought was reserved for me. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed, phone in my lap, numb. It was like the room spun while I stayed frozen. Everything I thought I knew about my marriage shattered in those few seconds. When he stepped out of the shower, towel wrapped around his waist, I was still sitting there with his phone in my hand. I must have looked like a ghost because his face instantly shifted. He knew. He didn't even ask why I had his phone. I asked him point blank, "Who is she?" My voice cracked, but I held his gaze. At first, he tried to deny it, fumbling over his words, but when I read one of her messages out loud, the color drained from his face. And then, instead of apologizing, instead of breaking down in shame, he snapped at me. He actually said, "If you weren't so cold lately, maybe I wouldn't have needed someone else." I couldn't believe it. I was the one sitting there, heart ripped open, and somehow he was turning it around, making it my fault. The betrayal burned, but the blame cut even deeper. First, it was pure fire. I don't even remember half the words that came out of my mouth, but I know I screamed until my throat burned. Every ounce of rage, confusion, and heartbreak poured out of me in one explosive wave. How dare he? How dare he betray me and then have the audacity to blame me for it? I listed every sacrifice I'd made. Moving cities for his career, taking on more at home so he could focus on work, standing by him when things were tough. And this was my reward. But beneath the fury, there was something worse. The sinking, hollow feeling of humiliation. I kept thinking, was I really that blind? Was I not enough? I hated him for what he did, but in that moment I hated myself more, for loving someone capable of hurting me like this. I felt like I was crumbling from the inside out, screaming on the outside while shattering silently within. After the storm of yelling, something inside me just broke. The anger burned out, leaving this heavy emptiness behind. I sat on the floor of our bedroom, my face buried in my hands, and the tears wouldn't stop coming. They weren't loud sobs anymore, just quiet, steady streams of grief that felt endless. I remember whispering almost to myself, "Why wasn't I enough?" I wanted him to say something, anything that could undo the pain. But he just stood there, arms crossed, defensive, like he was the victim in all of this. That hurt more than the affair itself. He wasn't even sorry. At least, not in a way that mattered. There was no real remorse, no desperate plea to fix what he'd broken. Just cold excuses. In that moment, the sadness hit harder than the rage ever could. Rage gave me energy. Sadness drained everything from me. I felt small, disposable, and unbearably alone in the same room with the man I thought would be my forever. Once my tears quieted, he finally started talking. Not to apologize but to explain, or at least that's what he called it. To me, it sounded like a list of excuses, rehearsed in his head long before I ever caught him. He said he felt neglected, that I had been too focused on work, on keeping the house in order, on everything but him. He claimed he was lonely, that he just wanted to feel wanted again. Every word was like a knife twisting deeper. Not because I believed him, but because it was clear he'd convinced himself that his betrayal was somehow justified. That instead of admitting he chose to cheat, he needed to frame it as my failure. What hurt most wasn't just that he betrayed me, but that he refused to take responsibility. He didn't say, "I made a mistake." He said, "You pushed me into this." And in that moment I realized, I wasn't just fighting for my marriage. I was fighting against a man who had rewritten reality to protect his own ego. As he stood there, throwing out reasons that sounded more like insults, something inside me shifted. It was like a veil had been ripped away, and I could finally see the truth I had been too afraid to face. This marriage wasn't what I thought it was. Maybe it hadn't been for a long time. I kept replaying all those nights he came home late, all those weekends he seemed distant, all the times he brushed off my concerns with a half smile and a pat on the shoulder. I thought he was stressed, tired, maybe just distracted by life. But no. He was choosing someone else while letting me believe I was crazy for even suspecting it. That realization hurt in a way I can't fully put into words. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the erosion of trust, the gaslighting, the lies that stretched back further than I wanted to admit. The man I had built my life with wasn't the man standing in front of me. And once I saw that clearly, I couldn't unsee it. The days that followed were unbearable. We still lived under the same roof, but it felt like a Cold War zone. Conversations shrank down to logistics. Bills, groceries, schedules. The warmth, the laughter, the small touches that once filled our home had vanished completely. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence between us. He'd roll over, phone in hand, pretending to scroll through news or work emails. I didn't even have the energy to ask anymore. Whether he was texting her or just avoiding me, the result was the same. I felt invisible in my own marriage. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from lying next to someone who no longer loves you, or worse, someone who blames you for their betrayal. I think that loneliness was the moment I really started letting go. It wasn't an explosive decision. It was slow, painful, and quiet, like the air leaking out of a balloon until there's nothing left. Eventually, the silence became too heavy, and I told him we needed to talk. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same spot where we'd once planned vacations and laughed over takeout. This time, though, the air was thick with resentment. I asked him as calmly as I could if he even wanted to save this marriage. He didn't give me a straight answer. He shrugged, said things like, "I don't know if we can get back to what we were. And maybe this is just how people drift apart." Not once did he fight for me. Not once did he say he regretted it, or that he'd do anything to fix it. It was all apathy, avoidance, and vague excuses. And in that moment, the choice became clear to me, even if it terrified me. I realized I couldn't stay with someone who wouldn't choose me back. The marriage wasn't something I could save alone, and he had already checked out. The night after that conversation, I sat alone in our living room, staring at the walls we had painted together, the photos of vacations and holidays that suddenly felt like relics of another life. My chest ached, but for the first time, I felt a sliver of clarity cutting through the fog. I realized I couldn't keep sacrificing myself on the altar of a marriage he had already abandoned. I deserved better than half-truths, late-night texts to someone else, and excuses that painted me as the villain in my own story. So I made the decision. I was leaving. It wasn't dramatic or fiery. It was quiet, steady, and resolute. Chose myself. I chose peace over chaos, dignity over desperation. And even though the thought of starting over terrified me, the thought of staying, of shrinking smaller and smaller just to make space for his lies, terrified me more. When I finally told my family and close friends, the words felt heavy in my mouth, like they didn't belong to me. He cheated. I'm leaving. Saying it out loud made it real in a way that even my own thoughts couldn't. The reactions were a mix. Some were furious on my behalf, ready to march over and confront him themselves. Others were quiet, pulling me into hugs, just letting me cry into their shoulders. A few admitted they'd had a feeling something was off with him for a while, which stung but also validated what I'd been sensing all along. What surprised me most was how supported I felt. For so long, I had been trapped in the isolation of our marriage, gaslit into believing I was paranoid or cold or not enough. But outside that bubble, people reminded me of my worth. They reminded me that I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. It didn't erase the pain, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks. Strength. Packing up my things was surreal. Every drawer I opened was a reminder of the life we had built together. The shared mugs, the concert tickets tucked into books, the sweater he once bought me on a whim. I moved slowly, sometimes stopping mid-box to cry, sometimes feeling nothing at all. When I finally loaded the last bag into my car, I didn't look back at the house. Couldn't. That wasn't my home anymore. It was just a building full of ghosts. The first night in my new apartment was both heartbreaking and liberating. The silence was different, not heavy and hostile like it had been in our bedroom, but light, open, full of possibility. I lay on the mattress on the floor, the furniture hadn't arrived yet, and cried again, but this time the tears felt cleaner, almost like a release. It was the first time in a long time I felt the smallest spark of hope. Healing wasn't linear. Some mornings I woke up with a sense of freedom, breathing easier in my new space. Other mornings, I woke up with the crushing weight of loss, my body aching with the absence of the man I thought I'd grow old with. But slowly I started doing small things just for me. I signed up for a yoga class. I cooked meals he never liked but I secretly loved. I reconnected with friends I had drifted away from while I was busy trying to hold my marriage together. Each small step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been buried under compromise and disappointment. For the first time in years I asked myself, what do I want? What makes me happy? And the answers, though quiet at first, started to come back to me. It wasn't about getting over him. It was about coming back to me. Looking back, I realized the betrayal taught me things I never would have learned otherwise. Painful lessons, yes, but important ones. I learned that love without respect isn't love, it's dependency. I learned that trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt by one person alone. And I learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, even when your heart is still clinging to the idea of what could have been. Most of all, I learned that I am stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. The woman who once thought she couldn't survive without him now knows she can stand on her own. And not just stand. She can rebuild, thrive, and demand the kind of love that doesn't come with conditions or excuses. The pain reshaped me. It stripped me down, but it also revealed parts of me that had been waiting to be seen. If you're reading this and you felt that gut punch of betrayal, let me tell you what I wish someone had told me. It is not your fault. You didn't make someone cheat. You didn't push them into lying. Those choices were theirs alone. You deserve honesty. You deserve respect. And if someone tries to twist their betrayal into your failure, don't believe it. That's just another way they're protecting themselves from facing the truth of who they are. Leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the most freeing. I won't pretend the road is easy. It's messy, painful, and full of nights where you'll doubt everything. But on the other side, there's a version of you who is stronger, wiser, and softer in the right ways. My advice: listen to your gut. Trust your worth. Don't cling to someone who makes you feel small. You can survive this. More than that, you can grow from it.